Welcome to the Twist News. I'm Erika Grey. I'm going to talk about how the U.S. conservatives differ from the European Union conservatives. Now, I've been around the conservatives quite a bit, probably in about 4 different events now, and meeting different conservatives from the different countries throughout the European Union, different politicians, MEPs, all kinds of individuals who all share conservative values. I've also been with the liberals in Europe too, so I have that balance of being both with the liberals and the conservatives and knowing how they differ and how they differ from U.S. liberals and U.S. conservatives. So that's what this show is going to be about right now. How do the European conservatives differ from the U.S. conservatives? Well, I would say first and foremost, there are 2 different sets of issues in the United States versus Europe. In the United States, you have the Republicans and you have the Democrats that are constantly at each other and at war. And they differ in the areas of spending, with the Democrats being much more liberal concerning spending. Also on the social issues, again, with the conservatives being more conservative on the social issues. And you also have the religious element making up a good portion of the conservatives within the United States. But you also have those who are unaffiliated who are also conservatives. But a big issue in the U.S. is spending, as well as some of the other issues that I cited. Now, in Europe, totally different. Spending is not an issue like it is in the United States, and neither is certain issues that are really hammered, such as in the United States, you have the right to bear arms. That's a conservative issue. That's a non-issue in Europe, totally a non-issue. Other non-issues are some of the social issues don't become points specifically, but what you do, and spending is not an issue in Europe. You don't hear about spending, too much spending, cutting back on spending. But what you do have in Europe that divides the conservatives from the liberals is more Europe, or a federal Europe, and many of the liberals are federalists, which means that they want a United States of Europe with power coming from Brussels. And the conservatives in the European Union are for the nation state having more power, not giving all of that power to Brussels, and for the nation state still having say in various legislation. And also, the conservatives in Europe want a looser confederation versus a full-on federation. Although Nicola Provocative of the European Conservatives and Reformists has also talked about European federalism, but with a different view than the liberal federalists. So that was a first for me to hear a conservative in Europe talking about federalism, but federalism as more of fulfilling the conservative idea versus the federalist European movement idea, and the federalist idea that Provocative is talking about is more, again, of a looser federation where certain things are handled by Brussels and other issues are handled by the nation state. Now, this is a very big difference from U.S. conservatives. This is a non-issue in the United States. In the United States, we don't have the issue of our federation and how should we be forming and how should we be joined and what's violating sovereignty. Also, another interesting piece of the European conservatives is that they also want to retain cultural identity. And you don't have that either in the United States. You don't have cultural identity being an issue because the United States was essentially formed from scratch. And people had come over, and so you have in the United States a state sort of pride, individuals coming from New York or Connecticut or Colorado, having some pride in their state, but not the same, it's not the same ball game as in Europe, where when you go to Ireland, you're with the Irish, and when you're in Italy, you're with the Italians, and when you go to Spain, you're with the Spaniards. Very different. Each has a very different culture in Europe. There is definite cultural diversity, although the Federalist motto is unity in diversity. So again, it's a different ball game in Europe versus the United States. On the social issues within the European conservatives and reformists, there is a similar thread as is in the United States, where you do have the religious element. I've met a good deal of Catholics, more Catholics than evangelicals. Actually, I've also met a couple of evangelicals that are within that group. So similar to the U.S. conservatives, you have those who hold religious as well as traditional family values. Now, here's another difference. Within the European Union, the liberals are far more liberal than in the United States. So much more liberal than in the United States. In the European Union, the liberals are far more liberal when it comes to social issues. So liberal, as a matter of fact, that the conservatives who hold conservative values are considered as violating rule of law, democracy, by not being so tolerant of the different liberal ideas. So you see that the liberals are actually more liberal. I would say that the liberals also have a greater foothold in the European Union. But after all, its roots are in Babylon, and you see this from its ancient history, from the ancient history all the way back to Babylon. So it's not surprising that it is as liberal as it is, much more liberal in social issues than in the United States, so that the conservatives are considered right-wing and radical for holding those views, or they're considered authoritarian for holding their views. So you see a greater divide with the liberals and the liberals in the United States on the social issues, where in Europe it's far more extreme. It seems to have taken hold of more of EU law, and the conservatives really appear to be more of a minority, even though their numbers are pretty good, but not super great. In the parliament, they're not holding as many seats as the liberals, and they're hoping to get more seats and have their message heard. They definitely provide a needed balance to the liberal point of view, but you definitely see that the liberals in Europe are very different. And concerning spending, the EU budget pales compared to the US. That's still an issue that they're working on. So it's not reached the same place because they're not a full federation. And so you see the liberals working towards a full-on federation with power in Brussels. But there's also this idea of unity. The liberal idea of unity eliminates some of the cultural identity and this idea of this one world, one empire, one people united in diversity. But how much diversity are the liberals really allowing? I'm not sure that it's really too much diversity to an extent, but the laws that are proposed, at least for the treaty changes that are going to come, are not going to be that tolerant of those with other opinions. So that's also a concern. So this, I would say, is the big difference between the liberals and the conservatives in both Europe and in the United States. And also, there's a lot of bickering in the United States between the Republicans and Democrats. You don't see that as much in the European Union. You really don't hear among the liberals all of the complaints because of the conservatives, although they will bring them up, and they bring up the populists, and you will hear some talk within the conservatives of some of the liberals, but really it's more of they're really just strong in their beliefs and in getting their message out versus nitpicking the other side continuously like happens in U.S. politics. So those are the differences between the conservatives and the liberals, both in Europe, in the United States. This is from my having traveled with both the European conservatives and reformist parties several times, and also having been with the liberals several times. So I hope you found this informative. If there's anything you'd like to add, please add it. If you're a European citizen, would love to hear what you have to say. And be sure to subscribe to The Twist. Stay tuned for more. And check out our Amazon store.